All right. Phoenix Wright conquered. Uh, After 10,000 years of this is not me. My hands are up here. After 10,000 years, finally conquered this game. The estimated time to complete this game was like 16 and a half hours. I think I'm at let's see, it was about 3.5 hours today. So I think I'm at like 27, 30 hours or something like that. So kind of crazy. Cringiest part of the game is that last objection. In the DS games, you have to yell it into the mic. Oh my gosh. That's ridiculous. Yeah, Phoenix Wright won. Defeated, conquered, all that good stuff. Let's see where my thoughts take me. My overall thoughts, one of the first things that I definitely wanted to get out the way was that my experience with lawyers and courtrooms is primarily from TV shows like Suits. So, like the fantasized lawyering in many ways. It's not exact, but it'll give you a decent idea of how, maybe not it should go, but like what happens in those areas. So that's where a lot of my knowledge was coming from. Also, I'm not a visual novel guy. This game hits all the buttons that I feel is a visual novel that I feel is a visual novel game. And so that was also an interesting experience for me as well, because despite not really liking that particular style of game, I definitely got to say that I did like the game. Asterisk. There's an asterisk there. It's a really interesting conundrum that I have with this game, because I do like the I'm not 100% sure the best way that I want to explain it per se, but I would say that I like pieces of this game, but there are the other frameworks or the other foundations that this game is built on. They do some ridiculous things, and I'm not much of a fan of it. I have here, it initially started off great, but as the game gets further along, it starts feeling like a game, quotes. While a puzzle game, yes, I initially felt I could build a case, but instead turned into presenting evidence at specific points of testimony in addition to specific lines of testimony. Some connections, inconsistencies in evidence have ties to testimony and seem relevant. Episode 5 is the biggest offender of this. So there's just times where, someone would say something like, oh, the witness was shot twice. Meanwhile, I have a piece of evidence that says, hey, this gun was fired 3 times. And so maybe it's not specifically relevant to what the witness is saying, but if I bring up, hey, this gun was fired 3 times, and the witness is saying that the victim was shot twice, then that brings the narrative to a different path. But you can't do that. And so it gets gamey in the sense that it's a puzzle game. You have to figure out where a certain piece of evidence goes within a certain piece of testimony. And ultimately, I just wish that particular dynamic would have been expanded upon or done differently. But I have more on that in a little bit. Let's see. For the story, was it satisfying? I'm actually going to say that this story was surprisingly satisfying, and each episode wasn't actually as standalone as it might appear. The very last one was, but 1 through 4, they were all connected in some way. And that was really, really cool. I approve of that. You know, it's actually a continuous story that's building upon itself, upon past events and current events, which was really well done. Did it feel complete? I will say it felt complete. No complaints there. How was the pacing? I guess ultimately the pacing was pretty top-notch. I don't think there was anything that was really getting in the way except for the investigations. But, I mean, I'm not necessarily sure that that's a ding against the pacing. Thoughts on the story? The receipt Deus Ex Machina in episode 2 annoys me. Yeah. I might just leave it at that. The story formula is starting to get old around episode 3. I'm noticing every case needs a witness to change their testimony multiple times, and Phoenix is the only person who gets in trouble for wasting the court's time. This was definitely super, super obnoxious. And I definitely wasn't a fan of that. But, you know, it's all good in the hood, I guess. Because it is a game. So what you gonna do when they come and for you, bad boys? Let's see. Witness tampering, chain of custody for evidence, and perjury just seem like myths in this game. I thought that was particularly entertaining for this game because, like I said, all of my knowledge of lawyery games, or I'm sorry, all of my knowledge of like lawyers and courtrooms and things like that come from fantasized TV shows like Suits. So all these things that I hear in those TV shows just don't apply to this video game. This video game is its own world with its own laws, you know? So that was both interesting, but primarily disappointing because I couldn't really apply any of the knowledge that I supposedly had. The writing during investigations is quite nice and extremely obnoxious in courtrooms. Mostly for the, I would say, for the witness testimony parts, there's actually quite a bit of nice bits of dialogue and things like that outside of the testimony, but inside of the courtroom. But I would ultimately say that the writing in this game is actually really nice. I think they portrayed all the characters quite well. Especially Edgeworth and Gumshoe. They're probably the most developed characters in this game outside of Phoenix Wright. Actually, probably more than Phoenix Wright. For gameplay mechanics and design, I don't have too much here. What gameplay elements stand out? Why are lawyers investigating crime scenes instead of the police? This is just like, what the heck? You know, like, if I had the chance to remake Ace Attorney, or Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, it would be, I'm a lawyer, a client comes in, they give me their case, you know, I get their deposition or whatever, I hear their case, I take on the case, and then, you know, sure, I might go to the crime scene, I might look around or whatever, but I'm going to the police, and I'm saying, hey, hand over all the evidence or give me copies of the evidence. I need to see what's going on. You know, something like that. It's just kind of weird that Phoenix Wright ends up with all the evidence needed to convict people when none of that evidence goes through the chain of custody. And so there might have been some instances in this game where those rules of evidence law were actually used incorrectly. But at the same time, sometimes in trials, I guess, you know, it's up to the prosecution and or the defense to bring up the inconsistencies from the other side. So, you know, stuff. So you thought they talked about it in this game, but apparently not. But Phoenix Wright takes place in the dark age of law, where the existing real legal system is torn down, and instead there's this weird 3-person, 3-day trial system. So yeah, real law literally doesn't exist. Oh, interesting. I guess that also explains why the judge is such a sucker-foo. Interestingly enough, there's no combat in this game because, you know, it's a pretty standard visual novel for the most part. So there's that. So there, you know, no dungeons or anything like that, unless you count investigation days. For miscellaneous, for sound, I didn't get to hear very much of the music, but I do like this opening theme. And for the music that I did get to hear, I actually liked it a lot. I think this game has some pretty good music. There's no voice acting for the graphics. I didn't get the pleasure of listening, or I'm sorry, of viewing the pixel art. But I hear that a lot of people actually like the pixel art. I wasn't that much... or I would say the art of this game wasn't actually that bad. I probably would have preferred the pixel art, but what they presented was perfectly fine with me, so, you know, I'll take it. Replay value. I don't think there's any replay value in this game. But, you know, as I present that, you know, I guess I got to give the caveat that I only think games are replayable if they offer something different or offer something new when you play it again. And I don't think there's anything that you'll get from playing this game again other than the satisfaction of playing it again. And I don't think that warrants replay value. You know, if I want to play Legend of Dragoon 6 times, I'm just going to play it for fun. I'm not going to play it for a different experience. And if the developer is watching, as with many first entry games I play, I think this is a satisfactory starting point. I think the foundation of this game is there, and it works. There are some issues I have with it, but if the base of the game works, then everything after it can just be improved upon. So while there may be things that I don't like about Phoenix Wright 1, the sequels are more than capable of changing things around. So, with that in mind, I'd like to see some changes to the formula. I'd like to approach court cases differently than just testimony. There are situations where I would like to call witnesses, or I would like to present evidence that could change the dynamic of how the court is going. There's just weird instances where there's perfectly viable evidence that can't be used, but is completely relevant to what's going on. For example, that time where I had to present the picture that had the halberd in it, but I wanted to present the trophy without the halberd on it. You know, I mentioned that before, but that's a perfect instance of, hey, these are 100% viable things that lead to the same path. They just, you know, it's a slightly different approach of how you get there. I would like investigations to be reworked into something different. I don't really have an idea of what I would want for this. I imagine that investigations are going to stay the same throughout the entire thing, but I guess in a lot of ways they just kind of feel like a slog. They kind of slow down the game, even though they're important to the game. If we could speed it up, or if the police can investigate for us and they just give us evidence and we got to comb through all the evidence and link things that are relevant or contradictory to like testimony that we already have or something like that, that would actually be kind of cool. Now that I'm thinking about it, you know, they just hand us a stack of papers and we would we would have to go through those papers and read them and you know, I don't know, find sentences and things like that that contradict other pieces of evidence that we have, or link fingerprints with fingerprints that are somewhere else. That would be kind of cool. The final chapter of this was really starting to press the boundaries of what you could do, not just in court battle, but during investigations. And I really think they can spread that out now that, you know, I start talking through that. I want to build and then present a case instead of flailing around trying to find a connection in an unwinnable one. This entire game is finding a bunch of clues and then trying to figure out which clue is most relevant to the situation going on without, for the most part, having any real conclusive idea that that clue is what's needed to progress. Like in the beginning of the game, it's pretty clear. And as the game goes on, it starts getting more and more unclear because there's so much evidence. And sometimes evidence is used multiple times, sometimes back to back, which is even more crazy. Because why would you present the same piece of evidence back to back when you just presented it, you know, 2 seconds ago? And you don't have to do that, I guess. You would like investigation to be revoked? Yeah, you too. That's why you love Socrates Jones. Same court feeling, no investigation. I'm gonna have to look into that. That was actually one thing that I wanted to mention too, is one of the things that I'm kind of disappointed in is, because this is kind of a visual novel, I want to, like, normally if I was on the fence per se about if I wanted to play a game right away or if I wanted to play it later, I would go take a look at some of the footage of the next game and I'd be like, okay, let me look at it, see what they improved, see what they didn't, and see when I want to fit this in. But for a game like Phoenix Wright, you can't really do that because anything you look at is going to be a spoiler and you're going to remember it. So I can't necessarily go look at episode 25 of some random Let's Play on YouTube and see all the changes, because that's going to spoil court cases and all that other stuff. So I have a real conundrum in that regard. And then the other thing is I'd like to see an itinerary of things needed to be done on investigation days. I want a better idea what I need to do, who I need to talk to, and where to go next. Maybe a map that shows where people currently are and who is MIA. I think that's just one of those little quality of life changes that would be kind of nice, because there were a couple of instances where I wasn't sure where to go or who to talk to or who to press more for more information on an investigation day. And that ended up being kind of tedious, you know, it slowed things down a little bit. Because sometimes you gotta present a certain piece of evidence. There was one instance where I had to, I think it was Miles Edgeworth, while he was in jail, I had to present my attorney's badge to him. And I would have never done that if Heels, at like the very beginning of the game, was like, oh, there's this joke in the Phoenix Wright series that if you present your badge to people, you know, you get like some unique dialogue or something like that. So in that moment, I was like, oh, okay, I'm done talking to Edgeworth. Let me just present my badge because I want to be funny right here and see what he says. Maybe he'll like yell at me or something like that. And it turns out that's what was needed to progress the quest. So it would be nice to get things a little bit more clear on how to move forward. And so, in closing, I would say that I like this game, asterisk. I'm not sure if I necessarily want to play the other 2 games that I have on this trilogy. Not in the sense of I don't think I'll like them, but in the sense of I've already heard from Heels, and I'll probably hear from some like Reddit searches and things like that, that the other games don't really change all that much. Is there really much that is going to change with the Ace Attorney series, the trilogy, that will fix some of the issues that I have and make the game a little bit more enjoyable? And I'm not sure that's there. While I did enjoy my time with the game, it's not a game that I see myself going to and be like, okay, I gotta play this one. This isn't the next Trails of Cold Steel for me. You know what I'm saying? It's definitely a game where it's like, okay, my game choices are running low right now. I need a game that I can play that's gonna take up about 20 to 30 hours. That way I can move on to something else that's going to be maybe a little bit longer experience or something like that. And I think this game would make a perfect filler game. It would be like a Professor Layton game, basically. It would fill that void for me. So I think those are basically my thoughts on it. When I continue with the second one, I have no idea, but I can't imagine it'll be anytime soon. There's a lot of reading in this game, and it's basically all reading, which is one of the unfortunate things about this, or about streaming this and deciding to read it, is you don't actually get to make a lot of offhand comments or things like that unless you kind of stop the flow of things. There's no random encounters where you could just talk about wanting to go to Subway and finding out that they closed down the Subway that you normally go to, you know? You gotta kind of fit those in someplace else, and there really isn't any place else to do that. So anyways, that's gonna wrap up my thoughts for today. Finally get done with this. It's 9:47. Thanks for watching, appreciate it. I'll be back tomorrow 6:00 p.m. Pacific to play something new. So thanks for watching, appreciate it. See you tomorrow. Peace.